Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama. Thank you. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Giri Vadadari. Jai Gopijana Vallabha Giri Vadadari. Gopijana Vallabha Giri Vadadari. Yasoda Nandana Brajana Ranjana. Yasoda Nandana Brajana Ranjana. Yasoda Nandana Brajana Ranjana. Yasoda Nandana Brajana Ranjana. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Yamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Shri Radha Girdhari ke, Srila Prabhupada ke, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ke, Samaveda Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ke, Gaur Premanande. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Budale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gaur Vani Vacharne Nivishesha Sanoni Paschadistarne. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're getting to hear from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 27, Text number 9. Attacked by Chandra Vega on the city of Paranjan. Putranam cha bhavan putra. Ekaikasya shatam shatam. Yarvai Paranjano vamsha. Panchaleshu sameditaha. Putranam cha bhavan putra. Ekaikasya shatam shatam. Yarvai Paranjano vamsha. Panchaleshu sameditaha. Putranam cha bhavan putra. Ekaikasya shatam shatam. Yarvai Paranjano Vamsha Panchaleshu Sameditaha Putranam Chabhavan Putra Ekaikasya Shatam Shatam Yarvai Paranjano Vamsha Yarvai Paranjano Vamsha Panchaleshu Sameditaha Putranam Chabhavan Putra Ekaikasya Shatam Shatam Yarvai Paranjano Vamsha Panchaleshu Sameditaha Putranam of the sons, Cha also, Abhavan were produced. Putra sons, Ekasya of each one, Shatam 100, Shatam 100, Yai by whom? Vai certainly, Paranjanaha of King Paranjana, Vamsha family, Panchaleshu in the land of Panchala, Sameditaha greatly increased. Of these many sons, each produced hundreds and hundreds of grandsons. So we're referring to the last two verses. No, last verse. After this, King Paranjan, king of the Panchala country, in order to increase the descendants of his paternal family, married his sons with qualified wives, married his daughters with qualified husbands. Of these many sons, each produced hundreds and hundreds of grandsons. In this way, the whole city of Panchala became overcrowded by these sons and grandsons of King Paranjana. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. We must remember that Paranjan is the living entity and the city Panchala is the body. The body is the field of activity for the living entity, as stated in the Bhagavad Gita, Kshetra, Kshetragya. There are two constituents. One is the living entity, Kshetragya, and the other is the body of the living entity, Kshetra. Any living entity can know that he's covered by the body if he only contemplates the body a little bit. Just a little contemplation. With a little contemplation, he can come to understand that the body is his possession. One can understand this by practical experience and by the authority of the Shastras. In the Bhagavad Gita 2.13, it is said, Dehinosmin yata dehe. The proprietor of the body, the soul, is within the body. The body is taken as the Panchala Desh, or the field of activities wherein the living entity can enjoy the senses in their relationship to the five sense objects, namely Gandha, Rasa, Rupa, Sparsha, and Shabda. For those who don't know, Gandha, fragrance, Rasa, taste, Rupa, form, Sparsha, touch, and Shabda, sound. That is, sense objects made out of earth, water, fire, air, and sky. Within this material world, covered by the material body of subtle and gross matter, every living entity creates actions and reactions, which are herein known allegorically as sons and grandsons. There are two kinds of actions and reactions, namely pious and impious. In this way, our material existence becomes coded by different actions and reactions. In this regard, Srila Narottam Das Thakur states, I wish Ramapati was here, Karma kanda jnana kanda kevala vishera bandha amrita baliyaye bakaya nana yoni sada pire kadaya bhakshana kare tara janma anda pahateya. fruitive activities, and mental speculation are simply cups of poison. Whoever drinks of them, thinking them to be nectar, must struggle very hard, life after life, in different types of bodies. Such a person eats all kinds of nonsense and becomes condemned by his activities of so-called sense enjoyment. End quote. Thus, the field of action and reactions by which one's descendants are increased begins with sex life. Paranjan increased his whole family by begetting sons who in their turn begot grandsons. Thus the living entity, being inclined towards sexual gratification, becomes involved in many hundreds and thousands of actions and reactions. In this way, he remains within the material world simply for the purpose of sense gratification and transmigrates from one body to another. His process of reproducing so many sons and grandsons results in so-called societies, nations, communities, and so on. All these communities, societies, dynasties, and nations simply expand from sex life. As stated by Prahlad Maharaj, Janmaitanadi Grihimedi Sukam Hitucham. Bhagavatam 7:9-45. A Grihimedi is one who wants to remain within this material existence. This means he wants to remain within this body or society and enjoy friendship, love, and community. His only enjoyment is in increasing the number of sex enjoyers. He enjoys sex and produces children, who in turn marry and produce grandchildren. The grandchildren also marry and in their turn produce great-grandchildren. In this way, the entire earth becomes overpopulated. And then suddenly, there are reactions provoked by material nature in the form of war, famine, pestilence, and earthquakes, etc. Thus the entire population is again extinguished, simply to be recreated. This process is explained in Bhagavad Gita 8:19 as repeated creation and annihilation, bhutva bhutva paliyate. Due to a lack of Krishna consciousness, all this creation and annihilation is going on under the name of human civilization. This cycle continues due to man's lack of knowledge of the soul and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Bhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadandikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shiyata Patikamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shiva Shakan Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karana Sindho Dinabandho Jigatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavanishwari Vrishabhana Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanshakopatarubyascha Kripasindhu Bevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivas Adi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So you know what the problem is with Paranjan or Prachini Bharshat? What the problem is? He's in ignorance. What's wrong with that? Ignorance is bliss. That's what they would tell us. But we don't go by vox populi or majority vote rules, etc., etc. A few days back, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, we don't care if the entire world yells at us, telling us we're fools, because we're trying to follow the absolute truth. This morning we heard that it doesn't matter how many, you can take countless mental speculators, and no matter how much they speculate and speak, they will only come up with foolish untruth, because there's no connection to the absolute truth. So ignorance, they say, is bliss, as Dravida Prabhu says, yeah, for a little while. But in reality, ignorance is the root of all suffering. Now, it doesn't look like Puranjan Maharaj is suffering at all. He's got a beautiful wife, a trophy wife. He's enjoyed with her like anything. He's had so many sons and daughters. The dynasty is expanding. The kingdom's going on smoothly. He's enjoying. He's actually leading a very pious life. Well, he did slip up and he went to the forest to engage in killing innocent animals indiscriminately. And probably within his mind he thought, well, as a Kshatriya, I got to practice. I got to keep in form in terms of my expertise of weapons, etc. But no, he engaged in sinful activities, and he came back knowing that he had done wrong because his wife let him know she wasn't happy. But aside from that, it seems like a pretty rosy path he's going down. There's a, where is it? Yeah. As I've mentioned, there's so many places in the Srimad Bhagavatam that this type of example is shown and what its deficiencies are. What's good about it and what's bad about it. And we can go to, see if my phone will cooperate. In his narration, meaning Shukadev's narration about the householder Vaishnava King Priyavrata, Sri Shukadev Goswami spoke to Parikshit Maharaj in the Srimad Bhagavatam 5.1.29 as follows. He greatly loved his wife, Barhishmati, and with the increase of days, their exchange of nuptial love also increased by her feminine behavior as she dressed herself, walked, got up, smiled, laughed, and glanced about. Queen Barhishmati increased his energy. Thus, although he was a great, come on, Mr. Phone. Although he was a great soul, he appeared lost in the feminine conduct of his wife. He behaved with her just like an ordinary man, just like Puranjan, King Prachinabarsha. But actually, he was a great soul. Big difference between Priyavrata Maharaj and Prachinabarsha. In the same chapter, the Srimad Bhagavatam, verse 37, King Priyavrata condemned his life of material enjoyment as follows. Alas, how condemned I've become because of my sense gratification. I've now fallen into material enjoyment, which is exactly like a covered well. I've had enough. I'm not going to enjoy anymore. Just see how I've become like a dancing monkey in the hands of my wife. Because of this, I am condemned. This is the mood of a great soul. You can't always tell who a great soul is by his appearance or behavior. We're told one can understand by the sound vibration coming from his mouth. We can take it for granted, for sure, that King Puranjan only spoke nonsense. He only spoke Gramya Katha, glorifying his wife, glorifying his own activities. He was an ideal husband, an ideal father, grandfather, king. Check all the boxes. He had so much to tout, so much to talk about. But it was all useless. He didn't realize that he was a dancing monkey in the hands of his wife, and ultimately in the hands of Maya Devi. It's interesting. We can quote both Hitler and Goebbels. Goebbels, his propaganda minister. He said, if you want to tell a lie, tell a big lie. And then just repeat it again. Repeat it over and over and over. In time, everybody will believe it. Now, you know why that works? Because it's out of the playbook of Maya Devi herself. As I said the other day, if you follow the laws of God, whether you know it or don't know it, you're going to get the results. If you break the laws of God in ignorance or in knowledge, you're going to get that result. Enjoy or suffer. So Maya Devi, what's she telling all of us? Yeah, I'm the body. What's so bad about that? I get to enjoy. I mean, it sounds pretty fancy. Gandha, Rasa, Rupa, Sparsha, Shabda. How many flavors can we enjoy? But the downside is the repeated cycle of birth and death. I mean, nobody remembers how miserable it is in the womb. We can't remember that. I mean, the youngest memory I have is being in my crib, pulled myself up, and crying. I wanted my mommy. But that's so cute. That's endearing to the parents. But in the womb, as Kapila Dev explains to his mother, as Lord Chaitanya repeated it, explained to his mother Sachi, it is a miserable time. If we were packed up like that for the number of months one is within the womb of his mother, Mahahari's wife is still waiting to deliver a child. We're going on like 10 months almost. Yeah. It's not that abnormal, but it's like if you were able to hear the child inside going, "Come on already, my Lord, please, please, accept me, protect me, deliver me. I'm suffering." It would be torture to be packed up like that. And then when the mother eats anything spicy, too many chilies, this or that, then what happens? Then there's all the heat, the burning of the fiery digestion, just like, oh, and the misery, like such passionate foods cause misery. And then he or she in the womb has all their little brothers and sisters. The worms, the microbes, the germs, pinching, biting. This is not a fun time. But ignorance is bliss. I forgot all about that. And in one sense, Aponam Cha, it's Krishna's mercy we've forgotten. Those who have a memory that recalls everything, even in just one life, are often very depressed and very unhappy because they are always aware how miserable life has been. The beauty of Maya's tricks, her bait and switch, is that she promises happiness, pleasure, gratification. But then she just kicks the stuffing out of us. We suffer, in this purport it's talking about Adi Daivika. You got your wars, you've got your famine, your pestilence, your earthquake. So that's just the big picture, just Mother Nature throwing it at us. I didn't want to mention that one. He said viruses. I didn't want to overemphasize it. Did you know that the WHO changed the definition of pandemics in 2009? It used to mean that a disease, like a virus, that would spread exponentially across the globe very quickly. And the real underlying kicker, it caused tons of disease and deaths. That's the old playbook, bait and switch. We were promised we'd have millions of deaths. But anyway, they changed that to accommodate the SARS virus. For America, that wasn't a big deal. And in Asia, it was more of a deal. They lived through that. And certain goals were accomplished by certain people. But anyway, now they've changed it, taken out the quickness of spreading and the extreme numbers of disease and deaths. And now they can just throw pandemic around for any old virus they want, by definition. But anyway, Mother Nature has more than enough weapons in her arsenal to pummel us. And there's a purpose for it. We're meant to surrender. Going, why am I suffering? What's the problem here? I thought I was put here to enjoy. That's what I was promised when I was a young child. Goo goo gaga. Oh, everybody loves him. Let's take a divine example of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He dances, or Krishna, same leelas, dances, he plays, tries to pick up his father's shoes to bring them there. And when he can't pick up something to bring to mama, I can do it, I'm strong. Or when he cries, they sing, and then he becomes happy. They give him a sweet, he becomes happy. When they sing, and he begins to dance like a puppet in their hands. So how can we not expect, wow, this is all right. I'm the center of attention here. That's why I descended that's why I came into this material world. I want to be the center of attention. But very quickly, it kind of passes on from Anamaya, Pranamaya, and then you start realizing that, oh my God, there's a lot of competitors for the spotlight here. Anybody have a younger sibling where it was kind of like, hey, what about me? How come she's getting all the attention? Maybe not. But it happens. What to speak of when you go to school. But anyway, the false promise is there. And we just eat it up. And that's the problem. And that's just in this one life. The suffering just compounds. I mean, it's like compound interest. It just gets worse and worse. And I'm sure Vijay Prabhu has the same experience. I have seen millions of people walk in front of me in my attempt to sell them something they absolutely don't need at all, trying to convince them that without this you can't be happy in life. But I've seen people, the older they get, some of them have these frowns, these upside down smiles tattooed on their face because the weight of the misery and the unfulfilled desires just getting heavier and heavier. Ground to, Maharaj has some saying that I don't know, but ground to dust by the wheel of time. You know, you wonder why old folks get grumpy. Some of them. And now everybody's like on edge. Oh my gosh. You say just the wrong thing and they want to destroy your life. Or people attack each other. You know, over some ideology or some words or something. I mean, we are in the midst of the age of quarrel. It is certainly accentuated. So anyway, we're meant to question these things. Paranjan, he hasn't met a sadhu. How can he know better? Everybody, that old majority rule, everybody told him he was his body. And he sure felt like it. But when you meet a devotee, if you're fortunate enough, having engaged in enough sukriti, then you appreciate what they're sharing with you. They're trying to say, Jeev Jago, wake up. It's a bad dream. In terms of sense gratification, this is a B-rate movie at best. Kind of become a cult classic by 99.9% of the people, but it's a horrible movie. This is not what we signed up for in our mind. We wanted that happily ever after, but it doesn't end that way. For a devotee who has embraced the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, then it's a fantastic, exciting adventure in our journey back home, back to Godhead. We take in stride all that Mother Nature throws at us because she's not touching us. She can't. We're not of this world. We're not this body. We're not this mind. And the sadhus continually remind us. We come to Bhagavatam, so important. We come to Bhagavatam and listen attentively. We apply our intelligence to the message. How does it apply to me? when Jud Bharat was insulted. Was it Maharaj Rahugana? You know, you lazy lout, would you carry my palanquin properly? I'm being jostled about. And he continued on, not wanting to step on ants, so he didn't keep in sync with the other palanquin carriers. And finally the king got out. He had enough. He gave him a good verbal lashing. And Jud Bharat just smiled. You can call me fat, you can call me thin, you can call me an idiot. You call me anything you want. And it may be true in this life, but in the next, who's to say? You're a king now, who's to say you won't be in my shoes next life? All these identities that we're holding on so tightly, they're going to be yanked away before you know it. And for 99.9% of the people, certainly before they want it to happen. Because it's never enough. Material existence does not deliver the happiness that Maya Devi promises. So, Atmagyan, it's so important. If you meet a devotee and he explains to you, just say, look at your hand, say my hand, my arm, my leg, my head, where are you? It's all a possession. It's all different from us. This verse, Deino sminyata dehe komaram yavanam jarat tade hantara praptir diras tatra namuyate. The example of, we think the bodies are growing. They're not growing. They're changing. And those of us who are older, it's especially accentuated in that I feel like the same person. Davida, you have the same experience? Like you feel like, I'm the same guy that I was when I was a young man or when I was a child. My likes and dislikes have changed somewhat. But I'm the same guy. I see these people when I drive home every day running. Some of them are jogging or bicycling. Some of them are outright sprinting. And I'm thinking, wow, I used to be able to do that. Now I don't have the energy to do that. Heck, I dance for a little spits here in the temple. I get winded, and this dang right calf just wants to start sending the nerve signals. This hurts. Stop. It's useless. It just becomes useless so quickly. That's what it seems like. Now, if I tell you, how old are you, Buck Alex? So, when you say somebody's 66 years old, he sounds like a pretty old man, doesn't he? Yeah, he sounds like a really old guy. I remember when I was 19, I joined. Oh my God, if there'd been a Srila Prabhupada, he was youthful though, because he was fixed in his eternal identity and relationship with Krishna. He could outwalk all of us. It was hard keeping up with Srila Prabhupada on a morning walk. I got the privilege one time. It was difficult. In Dallas, around the old White Lake or whatever it was. But anyway, unlimited energy. The sun has nothing on the spirit soul. Unlimited energy coming from the sun, but we're spirit. We're connected to Krishna, who has unlimited energy, and just the tiny little soul, it has more wattage than a sun. Hook it up if you knew how. Seriously, Satchidananda. It's not a material thing like the sun. So he could, there was nothing he couldn't do better. Brahmananda goes, nothing? Spiritual master can always defeat the disciple. Really, Swamiji? I think I could eat more than you. Oh, yeah? And I forget what the contest was, what they were eating. Do you remember, Balaram? But they brought, and Brahmananda was a young, healthy, big man with a big appetite. And Srila Prabhupada put him under the table. Yeah. It's the same vein as Madhvacharya. He one time ate 1,000 bananas. Yeah. It's like, 3,000 bananas in another time. It's like, you don't challenge the pure devotees and think you're going to walk away proudly victorious. It doesn't happen. The spiritual reality of who we are, and especially when engaging the body in the service of the Lord. I love these verses of the Bhagavad Gita. They attracted my, so-called intellectual side of me. But right from the get-go, these are a few verses. They have a common thread. We all know the prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvasha hankars mudhatma kartaham iti manyate. That we spirit souls were bewildered by the influence of the false ego, because we think ourselves the doer of the activities. If you think you're the body, then of course you think you're the body picking up the smartphone. I mean, these guys are so smart. To name it in such a thing that it'll only make me, I'm smart, I got a smartphone. They're so expert. But the activities are actually carried out by the three modes of material nature. We're not even doing anything. It's further elaborated on in the 5th chapter, 8th, 9th verses. A person in divine consciousness, although engaged in seeing, hearing, touching, smelling, eating, moving about, sleeping, and breathing, always knows within himself that actually he does nothing at all. Because while speaking, evacuating, receiving, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows that only the material senses are engaged with their objects and that he's aloof from them. The embodied spirit, master of the city of his body, does not create activities, nor does he induce people to act. That's a big one. I mean, we all think that, I can make people do things. I'm the doer. But we don't act. We cannot induce people to act, nor do we create the fruits of action. All that's taken care of. It's enacted by the modes of material nature. One last little one strung together on these thoughts. One who can see that all activities are performed by the body, which is created material nature, and sees that the self does nothing, actually sees. So we have this body, it's comprised of senses, we have this mind, and if it is used in the service of the Lord, because we realize it's His, it's created from His material energies, the mind and body, subtle and gross bodies we possess. We're His superior energy, the marginal energy of the Lord. We belong to Him. Everything we have that we consider our own belongs to Him. It should all be used in His service. And when a devotee does this, he's not responsible for the results. He's not bound up by the consequences of his behavior, which everybody in this world is bound up by. That's what sews us in, locks us into the future births and all the suffering that goes with it. Sons and grandsons, unlimited sons and grandsons, actions and reactions based upon the bodily concept of life. But two people apparently doing exactly the same thing, a devotee and a non-devotee. The devotee does everything for Krishna's pleasure, so Krishna takes care of him. The results are up to Krishna. I mean, the devotee of the Lord even thinks, I don't have to worry about my maintenance. I don't have to extraordinarily worry about my health. I don't have to worry about my son or daughter getting married. These are all just, it's like all the grandsons, grandchildren. Think back to us being someone's great-great-grandchild. Where is that parent, grandparent, great-parent, great-grandparent now? They're just names. They're just like bubbles on the foam of the waves crashing in on the beach. And that's what life is like. It actually is that quick when you step back and consider things from the point of eternality. But what makes it valuable to artadam, most valuable, this temporary body, is that we can use it in Krishna's service. We can voluntarily place ourselves under the instruction, the guidance of a pure devotee of the Lord. And then our activities have merit. Every step, every act, every word should take us closer to our desired goal of going back to the spiritual world and enjoying the service to Krishna and His loving reciprocation. Sex life, in comparison to any and all of that, doesn't hold a candle. A devotee's not a Vaishnava, not engaged in the responsibility of household life, doesn't give it a second thought. If it's not favorable for devotional service, then of course I don't do it. And even if I don't like it, if I am supposed to do it, that was the case of Priyavrata. He wanted to remain a Naistika brahmachari. His guru was sanctioning it, Narada Muni. But wait a second, we need the ruler. We need someone to, take reign, take charge of humanity. You're the one. It's fallen on your shoulders. And Lord Brahma, his grandfather, had to come down and tell him with a smile, you got to do it, but don't. Yeah, Brahma. So you got to do it, but with a smile he said it, because don't worry, you'll be protected. And the mentality showing he was protected was he thought he became degraded. A Vaishnava never thinks himself advanced. He's an insignificant servant of the Lord. He never thinks that his service it couldn't be improved. It can always be improved. We should always desire to improve in our service. And anything that we become consistent in, steady in, the execution of our sadhana and services, we shouldn't give that up, and then we should try to take the next step. It's like in the army when they have war and they win a hill, and they don't want to give that hill up, then they want to keep fighting the enemy back. So when you attain a level of bhakti, you're supposed to desire to become steady in that and then look for the next step. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur says if we don't do that, then we'll stagnate and then we'll deteriorate. Because complacency has no standing in devotional service. Once you become a little relaxed and want to kick back, that's when Maya is just right there to enter a desire from your heart, from your past, something you wanted, something that looks attractive now. And then before you know it, your mind and senses are engaged in something outside the service of Krishna. We always have to be praying for more mercy, more service, more advancement, more enlightenment in the devotional service. And the wonderful thing about it is, there's sinful sex life. Pranjan's not engaged in that. There's pious sex life. That's what he's engaging in. And by his activities, he'd get another human birth. He would have to suffer those animals he killed. They were waiting to get to give him his comeuppance, to punish him for having killed their bodies. But all in all, in comparison to the standard of today's humanity, he was pretty good. And then there's transcendental sex life, like Priyavrata engaged in, for the pleasure of the Lord, to have children that would be offered to the Lord, to also engage in the service for His pleasure. So those are all there, and I did want to, it's only applicable, the last transcendental sex life is only applicable for the householder, not for 3 of the other ashrams in life. So, but it's good, whatever ashram we're in, we have to know the philosophy and we have to be able to share it with those because it's applicable for most people. But one other point, it's not the biggest point, but Srila Prabhupada seems to contradict himself from a purport we had just a couple of days ago, where he said, in this way the entire earth becomes overpopulated. Well, I elaborated for about 10 minutes that there is no such thing as overpopulation, repeating the words of my spiritual master, Madhusudana Prabhu, shared with us, Srila Prabhupada said, the earth could hold 10 times more the population. Yes, he quoted Srila Prabhupada. So at that time, if it was about 4 billion people on the planet, it could support 40 billion humans with not a problem. I mean, we're not even a fifth of the way there. No problem. There's no lacking in anything in this world except Krishna consciousness. But here it's saying that the earth becomes overburdened, overpopulated. And that's in the same vein as if you look in the 9th canto of the Bhagavatam, she says, I can bear many heavy mountains or what have you, but I can't bear the weight of one liar. And we are surrounded by nothing but liars, practically speaking. How can you not be if you're in the bodily concept of life? Because it's all about me. And at best, a little extended selfishness for my family. If you're really kind of a nice guy, it'll be a little more extended to your community, possibly even your nation. But everybody else outside that circumference, no, I don't care. So I have an angle. There will always be envy and exploitiveness, which lies are the medium of expressing them. It'll always be there in one's dealings. It has to be. That's Maya. That's the material consciousness. That's the realm we live in. Liars and lied to, or cheaters and cheated. So anyway, what's the deal? Overpopulated? Yeah, it's overpopulated with sinful people. Last purport, Varna Sankara. Unwanted population, useless eaters. Maharaj made mention of this. So if people are not engaged in Krishna consciousness, in God consciousness, at least Dharma, religiousness, worshiping God as the order supplier, at least that, having some fear of God, recognition of God. If there's not that, then actually there is some validity to the demoniacally inclined leaders who consider all of us useless eaters. Because Shama Eveli Kevalam, if you're not engaging in Krishna consciousness or your activities aren't reawakening the desire to engage in Krishna consciousness, all those activities are useless. But the difference between them and the Lord, they're meant to represent Him in their leadership roles. The difference between them and the Lord is that the Lord is patient as anything. He stays with us side by side in the heart and just patiently waits, even if it takes multi-creations before the living entity wakes up and turns towards Him. But in the bodily concept of life, it's all about this life. Cram it in, jam it in, grab all you can. So Maharaj mentioned this eugenics. This is just a little history that I bet you haven't heard, and I thought I'd share it with you. You know where eugenics basically comes from? What it's so intimately connected with? Darwinism. In England, in modern history, that's when they really started pushing eugenics. What does eugenics mean? If you look it up, it means to cultivate, a superior, healthy, intelligent person, race or species. So to do that, part of it combined with survival of the strong, well, actually there's a lot of people who aren't fit physically, mentally, or morally, criminals, etc. They have no place in this paradigm. And very closely united to eugenics comes euthanasia. How do you say that? Euthanasia. So the point of history, did you know there was a time in American history, around the late 20s, that 30 of the states had laws for eugenics that included euthanasia? You look it up in Wikipedia. They say only 60,000. I doubt that number. But if you were feeble-minded, yeah. Sorry, I didn't make it clear. Thank you. Yeah, the Wikipedia says 60,000 people died under that program. Social workers had the legal ability that if you were either incarcerated or you were a ward of the state and you didn't measure up to the mark, they could quietly get rid of you. And they were pushing it big time in the schools, in the county fairs, and the churches. And they were convincing the black leaders, you got to convince these people that sterilization is good. And the reason why I bring it up is because if you connect the dots, history, some of this ideology has not died, it's only increased. I mean, what used to be called the, what was it? The Society, American Society for Birth Control, is that it? Something like that. That turned into Planned Parenthood. And people think it's a God-given right. It would be a total loss to humanity if they lost the ability to have abortions at demand. And they don't realize that this is just part of the euthanasia program. But they've convinced us that I'm proud to have that facility. I got to have that facility. And then they pushed it even further when, as Prabhupada talked about contraceptives in the purport a few days ago. That's just the same euthanasia program being pushed on, but now people are popping them in. They make them cheap and they pop them in daily, and they kill before the child even has a chance to take root in the womb. They'll kill it. I mean, this, if you step back, you hear about transcendence and what life is meant for, and how all life is soul, spirit, and is just as valuable and important as any of us in this room. Doesn't matter that they may be feeble-minded or physically challenged or in a weaker species, etc. They have a right to live. God gave them that eternal right. But, we're in such a topsy-turvy world that this idea there are way too many people, the earth is overpopulated, but they don't have to worry if they were actually just a little sober. Material nature will take care of it. But because you're part of the problem in the exploitiveness, I might be able to talk somebody into buying something that they don't really need, but you're talking people into doing that which is injurious to their health and what to speak of their life. And here's a quote, just to show you how committed they are. Prince Philip? He's not a king, he's a prince. He's Queen Elizabeth's husband. I think he's still alive. And he's like 90-something, right? He's really old. Do you know what he said about 40 years ago in the 80s? He said, I can only hope that when I take my next birth that I'll come back as a deadly virus so that I can help accomplish the depopulation of the world. Tatastu. So be it. By your sinful activities, you have no idea how you will suffer in hell preparing for the insignificant, tiny little germ that you want to become. Life is so serious. And you don't have a clue because you're on top of the dunghill. Thank goodness we have the mercy of Lord Chaitanya delivered to us by his servants, by Srila Prabhupada and his followers. We don't even have good qualities. We're products of Kali Yuga, and the qualification or disqualification isn't looked at. He simply says, please take the holy names. Please take the chanting of Hare Krishna. I want to give you love for Krishna. And if we take advantage of that, all the turbulent waves of the ocean that we find ourselves in with all this temporary drama, because it is all temporary and we're all so, fixed up in it, focused in it, turbulent times, craziest times I've ever seen in this life, short life, long life of 66 years. But it's all just for the devotee. He doesn't take sides. He doesn't come attached. He just focuses on his mission of trying to be Krishna conscious, pleasing Guru and Vaishnavas, and increasing the family of devotees for the pleasure of Krishna. Are there any questions or comments? Thank you for your patience, Dravida. I forgot to look on to see if anybody online had something. I didn't look that up first. See real quick. Anything at all catch your attention in the discussion? Okay. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhus, for being there and participating. So, Srila Prabhupada ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Samaveda Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki.